Hey guys, Mobile Geezer, back with another video, and this time it's nothing like malware or nothing too terrible. I just want to talk about the transition from Google Podcasts, which we basically lost 2 weeks ago, to YouTube Music Podcasts. So I've got this article from Tech Radar, and I wanted to go through it with you guys.
Let's do this!
So as we get started, I wanted to let you know that Google Podcasts was what I use for all the podcasts that I follow. And I have transitioned over to YouTube Music Podcasts, and I'll tell you about my experience with it once we get through the article. This came out April 11th, so 3 days ago. Google Podcast fans are furious about its demise. I am not, by the way. But YouTube Music fixes are coming. And this was by Mark Wilson on Tech Radar. Google promises new features, but will they be enough? So let's drop this into reader view, get rid of some of these ads. The latest unfortunate inhabitant of the Google graveyard is huge, as we all know, is the Google Podcast app, which was officially canned on April 2nd. And fans have been venting their frustration about being pushed to YouTube Music ever since. But now Google has tried to calm the unrest by promising that podcast-friendly fixes are coming to YouTube Music soon. In a Reddit post on the YouTube Music subreddit, a Google employee confirmed that an update to the app, which rolled out on April 8th, delivered a couple of useful features. These included the ability to sort of podcast episodes by publish date, plus some improvements to search results. And yes, I can tell you both of those worked. Listeners outside the US also got a new recommended shows shelf, which was already available in the US. But Google also admitted that more fixes are needed to make YouTube Music a better place for podcast listeners. It said those recent tweaks were only the beginning and that the podcast team is working on a lot more improvements that will be music to the ears of Google Podcast fans who've been venting their frustrations on Reddit and in the reviews for the YouTube Music app on the Play Store. The chief complaints are that the YouTube Music app is way more bloated than Google Podcasts, making it far harder to find and play episodes, and the persistence of frustrating niggles like listen to episodes remain in the UI. For many, the change echoes the similarly controversial and frustrating switch from Google Play Music to YouTube Music back in 2020. Back then, YouTube Music became the default pre-installed music player on Android 9 and 10 devices. But like YouTube Music's currently limited podcast talents, the app back then also had big holes, including no option to upload local MP3 files to the cloud to turn the app into a personal Spotify. Sadly, it feels like a case of history repeating. I disagree with that. But at least Google is promising further podcast fixes in the YouTube Music app, even though many Google Podcast fans have already jumped ship to alternatives like AntennaPod and Pocket Cast. I have tried AntennaPod. I'm finding the YouTube Music podcast better, or at least for me. Why has Google done this? The only real plus side of this switchover from Google Podcasts to YouTube Music is that it didn't happen overnight, with Google announcing the change back in September 2023. Yes, they gave us plenty of time. It also provided some tools to allow Google Podcast fans to transfer their subscriptions, and they made that super easy, in my opinion. But why make the change at all? The official reason is that a switch from Google Podcasts to YouTube Music was already naturally happening, and there is some data to back up this claim. In a blog post, Google revealed that according to Edison Market Research, around 23% of weekly podcast users in the US said that YouTube was their most frequently used service for the format, with only 4% of listeners choosing Google Podcasts. And I can confirm that before I went over to YouTube Music Podcasts, I started listening to some podcasts on that, and it was fine, but they have made it a lot better now. But it's clear that YouTube Music is currently a far inferior experience for dedicated podcast fans compared to the Google Podcast app. And it isn't clear how quickly YouTube is going to roll out its promised fixes. It's also likely that the high returns of YouTube's video adverts, which Google's dedicated podcast app lacked, played a part in the decision. Yeah, I would say that's probably true. For now, Google Podcast fans will have to endure niggles like the fact that the now defunct app is still sending out notifications for new episodes from the grave. And if the YouTube Music experience continues to remain frustrating and undercooked, they can at least investigate switching to one of the many excellent alternatives like the Android-only AntennaPod, which is completely free and has no adverts. As I said, I have already tried AntennaPod, and I think after the updates that Google put into YouTube Music app a couple of weeks ago, I find it's better than the AntennaPod, at least for me. It's closer to what I was used to in Google Podcasts. And since they made that change, I find it's pretty close, and I'm pretty happy with it. And the fact that when I listen to an episode, if there's a following episode, it'll come up automatically. It didn't do that until after they made the upgrade. So all in all, I just wanted to let you guys see this article and let you know I'm pretty happy with the YouTube Music Podcast. So you guys let me know what you think if you went from Google Podcast to YouTube Music. But as always, comments are welcome. Thanks for watching. And remember, if you like my content, please share the videos with friends, family, or whomever you think might be interested. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and be sure to click the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos that I upload. And please hit the thumbs up, as it does help with the algorithm.
So there's one other thing.
We all do better when we love each other.